The year was 2347, and humanity had waited a very long time for this moment. After centuries of looking up at the stars and wondering if they were alone, humans had finally received an answer. They were not alone. The galaxy was full of life, full of civilizations far older and more advanced than Earth. And now, for the first time, humanity had been invited to meet them. Ambassador Linda Holloway stood on the bridge of Earth's diplomatic vessel, the Resolute, as it dropped out of hyperspace near the massive orbital station called Kethra Prime. She was a tall woman in her 50s, with gray streaks in her dark hair and calm brown eyes that had seen many difficult negotiations. But nothing in her long career had prepared her for this. Through the view screen, she could see hundreds of alien ships moving around the station. Some were elegant and curved, made of materials that seemed to glow from within. Others were massive and brutal, covered in weapons and armor. Each one represented a species that had mastered space travel long before humans had even discovered fire. Captain Samuel Hayes stood beside her, his military uniform crisp and his posture rigid. He was a veteran of 20 years in the Earth's Defense Force, a man who had faced pirates and rebels and every kind of danger the solar system could offer. But even he felt small as he looked at the alien armada outside. "Quite a welcome committee," he said quietly. Linda nodded. "They want to see what we look like." The new species. The curious primitives who finally figured out how to leave their little planet. The third member of their delegation, Chief Science Officer Nina Guerrero, looked up from her console. She was younger than the others, barely 40, with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. "The station is hailing us. They're assigning us a docking port on the outer ring." "The outer ring," Hayes repeated. "That's where they keep the cargo ships and waste processors." "They're making a statement," Linda said. "Let them. We didn't come here for comfortable accommodations." The Resolute docked without incident, and the three humans walked through the airlock into Kethra Station. The corridor beyond was enormous, designed for species much larger than humans. Alien beings moved past them, most barely sparing a glance at the newcomers. Those who did look wore expressions that the universal translators rendered as curiosity, amusement, or contempt. A floating drone met them at the end of the corridor. "Human delegation," it announced in a mechanical voice. "You will follow this unit to the Grand Assembly Hall. Do not deviate from the assigned path. Do not touch anything. Do not speak to other delegates unless addressed first. Friendly." Nina muttered. They followed the drone through a maze of corridors and lifts until they emerged into a vast, circular chamber. The Grand Assembly Hall was impressive by any standard. Hundreds of seats rose in tiers around a central platform, each section designed for a different alien species. The ceiling was a transparent dome showing the stars beyond. And holographic displays floated everywhere, translating speech and displaying data. The hall was full. Representatives from 12 spacefaring civilizations had gathered to observe humanity's first official contact with galactic society. Linda recognized some of them from the intelligence briefings she had studied during the long journey from Earth. The Veluxi were there, elegant insectoids with crystalline exoskeletons that reflected light in beautiful patterns. Their ships were works of art, and their mastery of energy manipulation was legendary. They had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. The Drothany occupied the largest section. Massive reptilians covered in natural armor. They were the military power of the Council, their fleets capable of destroying entire planets. Their leader, High Arbiter Vorak Dashen, sat at the center of the assembly, his yellow eyes fixed on the approaching humans. The Silvari were harder to see clearly. They were beings of light and thought, having evolved beyond physical bodies millions of years ago. They glowed softly in their section of the hall, communicating in ways that human technology could barely detect. And there were others. The Nethrani, the Korvik, the Elosian Federation, each one ancient, each one powerful, each one looking at humanity the way a grown adult might look at a child trying to join a conversation. Linda walked to the central platform with her head held high. She had been a diplomat for 30 years. She knew how to handle condescension. High Arbiter Vorak rose from his seat, his movements slow and deliberate. He was over 3 meters tall, his scales a deep green that was almost black. When he spoke, his voice was so deep that Linda felt it in her chest. "Species of Earth," Vorak began, "the Galactic Council acknowledges your presence. Your journey to the stars is noted. Your request for contact has been granted. Speak now, and the Council will listen." Linda stepped forward. "High Arbiter, members of the Council, humanity is honored by this invitation. We come in peace, seeking knowledge, trade, and friendship. We know that we are young compared to the great civilizations represented here. We know that we have much to learn, but we believe that we also have much to offer." Whispers rippled through the assembly. The translators picked up fragments. Much to offer. What could primitives possibly offer us? Vorak raised a clawed hand for silence. "The Council has observed your species for some time, Ambassador. Your expansion through your solar system has been ... energetic. However, we have concerns." "What concerns, High Arbiter?" "Your military technology?" Vorak's tone carried something that might have been amusement. "Your weapons are based on chemical propellants and kinetic projectiles. Methods that civilized species abandoned thousands of years ago. Such primitive armaments are inefficient, unreliable, and frankly beneath the standards of any council member." A Veluxi delegate made a clicking sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "We examined the scans of your vessel. Your main weapons fire metal slugs using explosive chemicals. It is like something from a museum." Linda kept her expression calm, but beside her, Captain Hayes was struggling to control his anger. He knew exactly what human weapons could do. He had seen battlefields where railgun rounds had torn through armored hulls like paper. He had watched missiles track and destroy targets across millions of kilometers. These aliens had no idea what they were dismissing. "We would be happy to demonstrate our defensive capabilities," Linda offered. "If the Council would permit a controlled exhibition, we could show you exactly what human technology can achieve." The hall erupted in alien laughter. Different sounds from different throats, but all carrying the same message. The primitives wanted to show off their toys. How amusing. Vorak silenced them with a gesture. "That will not be necessary, Ambassador. We have analyzed your weapons. Your fastest projectiles travel at perhaps 3 kilometers per second. Our shields can deflect energy bursts moving at the speed of light. Your technology poses no threat to any member of this council. It is simply irrelevant." Linda nodded slowly, showing no reaction to the insult. "I understand your perspective, High Arbiter. We ask only for the opportunity to prove our worth as potential members of this council." "Membership is not being considered at this time," Vorak replied flatly. "Humanity will remain under observation. You may establish a small embassy on the outer ring of Kethra Station. You will have access to public areas and basic trade channels. Nothing more." The meeting was over. The drone reappeared to escort them out. As they walked back through the massive corridors, Nina leaned close to Linda. "That was humiliating." "That was expected," Linda replied quietly. "They see us as children playing at space travel. They've made their judgments based on scanning our ships from a distance." Hayes spoke without turning his head. "They analyzed our weapons and decided they were no threat. They think shields that block energy will block everything, will they?" Nina asked. Hayes allowed himself a small, grim smile. "Energy weapons push. Kinetic weapons punch. There's a difference. A big difference. Sooner or later, they're going to learn that." Linda said nothing, but she was already thinking about the future. The Council had dismissed humanity. They had laughed at human weapons and human ambitions. They had made their position perfectly clear. Now it was just a matter of time before humanity made its position clear as well. 3 months passed slowly on. Kethra Station. The human embassy was exactly what Vorak had promised. A converted storage module on the outer ring. Far from the grand halls and elegant quarters of the established council species, Linda Holloway made the best of it. She decorated the bare walls with images of Earth, installed proper lighting, and set up a small conference room where she could meet with anyone willing to talk to the primitive. Newcomers, most species were not willing. The Drothani ignored humanity entirely, considering them beneath notice. The Veluxi sent a junior trade representative once, listened politely to Linda's proposals, and never returned. The other council members were equally dismissive. Humanity had been judged and found wanting. No amount of diplomatic effort seemed likely to change that verdict. Captain Hayes kept the Resolute ready for immediate departure. He ran drills every day, kept his crew sharp, and waited. He knew, with the instinct of a career military officer, that something would happen eventually. Something always did. Nina Guerrero spent her time studying. She learned everything she could about council technology, their history, their politics. She mapped out the complex web of alliances and rivalries that connected the 12-member species. And she paid particular attention to the threats that lurked at the edges of galactic civilization. There were many such threats. The galaxy was vast, and not all of its inhabitants had joined the council. Pirate clans operated in the spaces between systems. Rogue AI colonies had carved out territories of their own. And then there were the Keth Marauders, loose confederation of raiders who preyed on shipping lanes and remote outposts. Linda learned about the Marauders from a Sylvari diplomat named Essence of Twilight. The Sylvari were perhaps the only council species that treated humans with something approaching respect. They were curious about Earth's art and philosophy, interested in the way humans thought about existence and meaning. Twilight visited the embassy regularly, its glowing form floating through the cramped corridors. As it asked questions about human poetry and music, it was during one of these visits that the crisis began. Twilight arrived at the embassy, pulsing with agitation. Its usual calm completely shattered. Linda had never seen a Sylvari so disturbed. "Ambassador Holloway," Twilight said, its voice resonating directly in Linda's mind. "There's a situation. A terrible situation. I came to you because I did not know where else to go." "What happened?" Linda asked. "The Keth Marauders have seized Relay Station 7. It is a communications hub in the Outer Territories. Far from council patrols, they came with overwhelming force, killed the guards, and took control of the entire facility." Linda frowned. "That sounds like a matter for the council fleet. It would be under normal circumstances. But the Marauders have taken hostages. 248 beings from 6 different council species, including a diplomatic delegation from the Veluxi and a group of young students on an educational tour. The Marauders are demanding the release of their imprisoned leader and a ransom of 10 million credits in rare minerals. They are killing one hostage every hour until their demands are met." "Every hour?" Linda felt sick. "How long has this been going on?" 17 hours. 47 hostages are already dead." Linda activated her communicator immediately. "Captain Hayes, Chief Guerrero, I need you at the embassy right now. We have an emergency." Within 20 minutes, the 3 humans were studying the tactical data that Twilight had brought. The relay station appeared on the holographic display, a 6-armed structure floating in the darkness between stars. 3 Marauder vessels orbited around it, modified freighters bristling with weapons. "What is the council doing about this?" Hayes asked. Twilight's glow dimmed with something like shame. "Debating. The Drothani want to destroy the station entirely, accepting the loss of the hostages as necessary casualties. The Veluxi refuse to risk their ships in a rescue attempt. The other members argue about jurisdiction and responsibility. Meanwhile, the hostages die." Nina pulled up more data on her console. "The Marauder ships are using standard council shield technology. Particle beams, energy deflectors, the usual configuration. 200 fighters on the station, armed with personal energy weapons. What about the station itself?" Hayes asked. "Light shielding only. It's a communications relay, not a military installation. The Marauders probably took it so easily because it had almost no defenses." Hayes studied the display for a long moment. His expression was completely calm, but Linda could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He was measuring distances, counting weapons, planning angles of attack. "We can take them," he said finally. Twilight pulsed with surprise. "Captain, with respect, you have 1 ship. The Marauders have 3, plus the station's defensive systems they have certainly activated by now. The Council's own tactical analysts have determined that any rescue attempt would require at least 15 vessels. Council vessels, Hayes replied. With Council weapons, energy beams and particle cannons that their shields are specifically designed to block, and your weapons are different. Hayes smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Very different. He turned to Linda. Ambassador, I can do this. The Resolute can reach that station in 6 hours at maximum acceleration. I can neutralize those ships and put my Marines on that station before the Marauders know what hit them. The Council hasn't authorized any rescue attempt, Linda pointed out. If we act without their permission, there will be consequences. There are already consequences. People are dying. Children are dying if Twilight's information is correct. Hayes met her eyes. We became diplomats and soldiers to protect people, not to stand by while bureaucrats debate and innocents suffer. Linda looked at Nina. What do you think? Nina had been running calculations on her console. Tactically, it's possible. The Marauder ships are designed to fight Council vessels. They've never encountered kinetic weapons. Their shields will do nothing against railgun rounds, and their armor isn't designed to resist high-velocity impacts. If we hit them fast and hard, we can win. And if we lose, then we die heroes instead of living as the species that sat in their little embassy while the galaxy laughed at them. Linda turned to Twilight. If we do this, if we succeed, what will the Council's reaction be? The Sylvari considered the question. I cannot predict with certainty. But I know that the hostages include the daughter of a high-ranking Veluxi official and the nephew of Arbiter Vorak himself. If you save them, you will have earned favors that no amount of diplomatic maneuvering could achieve. And if we fail, then you will be dead. And humanity's reputation in the galaxy will be that of foolish primitives who died trying to play at being warriors. But Ambassador, I must be honest with you. Right now, humanity's reputation is that of harmless primitives who are not worth noticing at all. Is that truly better? Linda was silent for a long moment. She thought about Earth, about the billions of people who had sent her here with hopes and dreams of joining the galactic community. She thought about the hostages on that distant station, dying one by one while the Council debated. She thought about what it meant to be human, about the long history of her species, and the values that had brought them to the stars. Do it, she said finally. I'll contact Earth Command and inform them of our decision. Captain Hayes, you have authorization to proceed. Hayes nodded and activated his communicator. All hands, this is the captain. Prepare for immediate departure. We have a rescue mission. Twilight watched as the humans sprang into action, each one moving with purpose and determination. Ambassador, I do not fully understand your species, but I am beginning to think that the Council has made a serious error in underestimating you. Linda gathered her things, preparing to accompany the Resolute on its mission. They're about to find out just how serious that error was. 6 hours later, the Resolute's engines fired at full power, pushing the human vessel toward Relay Station 7, and a confrontation that would change the galaxy's perception of humanity forever. Relay. Station 7 floated in the empty space between star systems. Far from any planet or patrol route, it was the perfect target for pirates. The nearest Council fleet was days away, and the station's own defenses had been minimal even before the Marauders had destroyed them. Now it belonged to the Keth, and they intended to squeeze every possible advantage from their prize. Commander Draxel stood in the station's control center, watching the countdown on his display. 22 hours since they had taken the station, 47 hostages already executed, 191 still waiting in the holding cells, their fear growing with every passing minute. The Council had sent messages, of course. Demands for release. Threats of retaliation. Offers to negotiate. Draxel had ignored them all. He knew how the Council worked. They would debate and argue and form committees while he killed hostage after hostage. Eventually, they would give him what he wanted just to make the embarrassment stop. His second-in-command, a scarred Keth named Voss, approached with a report. Commander, our long-range sensors have detected an approaching vessel. Council fleet? No, Commander. A single ship. Small. The configuration matches the human vessel that docked at Kethra Station 3 months ago. Draxel laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the control center. The humans. The primitives with the chemical weapons? What do they think they're going to do? Unknown, Commander. They are approaching at high speed and not responding to hails. Open a channel. Let me speak to these fools myself. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Hayes watched the station grow larger on the view screen. His crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency, each one focused on their specific task. There was no nervous chatter, no visible fear. These were professionals who had trained for exactly this kind of mission. Lieutenant Daniel Ortiz sat at the weapons console, his fingers resting lightly on the controls. The ship's railguns were charged and ready, their electromagnetic accelerators humming with power. In the missile bays, warheads waited in their tubes, guidance systems locked onto the Marauder vessels. Captain, the communications officer reported, "The station is hailing us. Put them through." The main view screen flickered, and Draxel's reptilian face appeared. His scales were a mottled gray-green, and a long scar ran down one side of his face. His eyes were cold and calculating, the eyes of a predator who had never known defeat. "Human vessel," Draxel said, his voice carrying obvious amusement. "You are far from home. Have you come to beg for the lives of the hostages? I'm afraid the Council has already tried that approach. It did not work." Hayes leaned back in his command chair, his expression completely calm. "I'm not here to beg. I'm here to give you one chance to surrender." Draxel stared at the screen for a moment, then burst into laughter. "Surrender to you? One ship against 3? With weapons that couldn't scratch paint off a shuttle? Human, I have heard the reports about your species. Your guns fire metal pellets, using explosive powder. Your missiles are slow and stupid. You are no threat to anyone, and you won't mind if we put that to the test. By all means." Draxel spread his arms wide. "Fire your little weapons. Watch them bounce off our shields. And then when you realize how helpless you are, perhaps we will add your crew to our collection of hostages. I understand humans fetch a good price on the slave markets of the Outer Rim." Hayes made a cutting gesture, and the channel closed. "Mr. Ortiz," he said quietly, "target the flagship's shield generator. One shot. Let's show them what we can do." Ortiz nodded and tapped his console. The Resolute's main railgun was a marvel of human engineering. It used powerful electromagnets to accelerate a 20-kilogram tungsten slug to velocities that no chemical propellant could match. The projectile would leave the barrel traveling at 15 kilometers per second, far faster than any weapon the Council had ever developed. Firing solution locked. Target acquired. Firing. There was no flash of light, no visible beam. Railguns were silent and nearly invisible in the darkness of space. The only sign that anything had happened, it was a slight vibration through the deck as the electromagnetic coils discharged their energy. The tungsten slug crossed the distance between ships in less than a heartbeat. Draxel's shields were designed to deflect energy weapons. They created a field that could absorb photons, scatter particle beams, and redirect plasma bolts. Against conventional Council weapons, they were nearly impervious. But they had never been designed to stop solid objects traveling at hypervelocity. The slug punched through the energy barrier as if it wasn't there. It struck the shield generator with the force of a small nuclear explosion, converting all of its kinetic energy into heat and pressure in an instant. The Marauder flagship broke apart, its hull splitting open as secondary explosions tore through its interior. On the Resolute's bridge, the crew watched in silence as the enemy vessel died. "Target destroyed," Ortiz reported, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what had just happened. Draxel never saw the end coming. One moment he was laughing at the primitive humans and their useless weapons. The next moment, his ship was gone, and he was gone with it. The remaining 2 Marauder vessels broke formation in panic. Their captains had just watched their flagship die to a single shot from a weapon they had been told was harmless. Every tactical assumption they had ever made was suddenly worthless. One ship tried to flee, turning away from the station and accelerating toward open space. The other began firing wildly at the Resolute green energy beams, lancing out across the void. Neither response would save them. Their weapons are having no effect, Nina reported from her station. Energy absorption is well within tolerance. Hull integrity at 100%. Hayes nodded. The Resolute's armor was thick steel and ceramic composite, designed to resist physical impacts and absorb energy. Against weapons meant to overwhelm shields rather than penetrate hulls, it was nearly invulnerable. Return fire. Disable both vessels. Aim for engines and weapons. I want prisoners. Ortiz went to work. The railgun spoke again and again, each shot precisely aimed to cripple rather than kill. The fleeing Marauder ship lost its engines first, then its weapons. It tumbled through space, helpless and dark. The firing ship lasted only slightly longer before its guns went silent and its power failed. Both hostile vessels disabled, Ortiz reported. No further resistance. Hayes allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction. Then he activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. Phase 1 complete. We now proceed to Phase 2. Marine boarding teams, report to the hangar bay. You will assault the station and rescue all hostages. Rules of engagement are weapons-free. If they shoot at you, you put them down. But remember why we're here. Those hostages are the mission. Protect them at all costs. In the hangar bay, 200 Marines were already forming up beside their assault shuttles. They wore powered combat armor, thick plates of composite material that could stop energy bolts and physical rounds alike. Their weapons were magnetic accelerator carbines, smaller versions of the ship's railguns, capable of punching through any personal armor in the galaxy. Sergeant Rosa Mendez walked down the line, checking her troops with a practiced eye. She was a veteran of a dozen engagements, a soldier who had earned every medal on her chest. Her Marines trusted her completely, and she trusted them in return. Listen up, she called out, her voice carrying across the bay. We've got about 200 hostiles on that station. They're armed with energy weapons that will sting, but probably won't kill you through your armor. Do not give them the same courtesy. Our rounds will go through them like they're wearing paper. She paused, looking at each Marine in turn. The hostages include children. 17 younglings, from various species. Those kids have been watching their friends die for almost a day now. They're scared and probably traumatized. When we find them, we protect them. We're not just soldiers today. We're rescuers. We're the people who came when nobody else would. Let's make sure those kids know that humans keep their promises. The Marines roared their acknowledgement, a sound that echoed through the metal walls of the hangar bay. Mendez smiled grimly and pulled on her helmet. Shuttles launch in 60 seconds. Let's go show these pirates what happens when they mess with the wrong species. The assault shuttles launched from the Resolute like angry hornets leaving a nest. 6 craft, each carrying 30 Marines in full combat gear. They crossed the void toward the wounded station in tight formation, their pilots pushing the engines to maximum power. Relay Station 7 had 6 modules extending from a central hub, like the arms of a starfish. The Marauders had set up their command center in the hub and were holding the hostages in Modules 3 and 4. According to the intelligence they had gathered, approximately 200 Keth fighters were spread throughout the station. Most of them concentrated near the hostage area. Sergeant Mendez reviewed the assault plan one final time as her shuttle approached the station. Alpha Squad, her squad, would breach the central hub and secure the control center. Bravo and Charlie squads would hit the hostage modules simultaneously. Delta, Echo, and Fox would establish a perimeter and cut off any escape routes. 30 seconds to contact, the pilot announced. Mendez checked her carbine one last time. The weapon was fully charged, its magazine loaded with armor-piercing rounds. Her sidearm was secure on her hip, and her combat knife was strapped to her thigh. She was ready. Remember your training, she told her squad over the comm? Fast and violent. Don't give them time to think. Don't give them time to hurt the hostages. We go in hard, and we don't stop until every friendly is secure. The shuttle hit the station's outer hull with a solid thunk. Magnetic clamps locked it in place, and a shaped charge blew through the metal plating, creating an entry point. Air rushed out into the vacuum, but the Marines' sealed armor protected them completely. Mendez was first through the breach. She emerged into a wide corridor, the station's artificial gravity pulling her down to the deck. Emergency lights flashed red and alarms screamed warnings that the Marauders probably didn't understand. 2 Keth guards stood at the end of the corridor, their energy pistols already coming up. Mendez fired twice. The magnetic accelerator carbine made sharp cracking sounds as it sent its rounds downrange. Both guards dropped, their bodies torn apart by projectiles, traveling at velocities their armor could never stop. "Move," Mendez shouted. Alpha Squad poured through the breach behind her, spreading out in a well-practiced pattern. They flowed down the corridor like water, each Marine covering the others as they advanced. The Keth they encountered died before they could even aim. Or weapons, it was a slaughter. The Marauders had been fighting Council species for decades. They knew how to deal with energy weapons, how to use cover that blocked particle beams, how to exploit the slow recharge rates of standard Council firearms. None of that knowledge helped them against humans. Human weapons didn't pause between shots. Human weapons punched through the walls that Marauders hid behind. Human weapons didn't care about personal shields or reflective armor. Every time a Keth fighter appeared, they died in the same instant, in the central hub. The surviving Marauder officers tried to organize a defense. They barricaded the control room doors and set up firing positions in the corridors. But Mendez simply had her squad toss grenades around the corners. The explosions tore through the barricades and the defenders behind them. "Control room secured," Mendez reported as she stepped over the bodies. "Moving to support hostage recovery?" Meanwhile, Bravo and Charlie squads had breached the hostage modules. The fighting there was more difficult because they had to be careful not to hit the prisoners. But the Marines were well trained, and their aim was perfect. Corporal Tyrell Matthews led his fire team into the first hostage holding area. The room was large, originally designed for cargo storage, now packed with terrified aliens huddled against the walls. A dozen Keth guards stood among them, using the hostages as living shields. Matthews didn't hesitate. His armor's targeting system highlighted each guard in his vision, calculating firing solutions that would avoid the hostages. He began shooting, each round precisely placed. The guards fell one after another, never getting a chance to harm their prisoners. A young Veluxi child screamed as a Keth fell dead beside her, splattering green blood across her crystalline shell. Matthews immediately lowered his weapon and moved toward her, his armored boots crunching on the debris-strewn floor. Hey, it's okay," he said, his voice calm and gentle despite the battle still raging elsewhere in the station. "I'm here to help. You're safe now." The child's mother reached out tentatively, touching the armor that had seemed so frightening moments before. The translator in Matthew's helmet rendered her words, "You are the humans." The ones they said were primitive. Matthews removed his helmet so she could see his face. He was a dark-skinned man with kind eyes, his expression soft, despite the violence he had just committed. "That's right, ma'am. We're the primitives. And we're going to get you out of here." Throughout the station, similar scenes played out. Marines cut through Marauder resistance with brutal efficiency, then transformed into gentle rescuers the moment hostages were found. They carried injured aliens who couldn't walk. They covered the eyes of children so they wouldn't see the bodies in the corridors. They spoke in soothing tones, offering comfort to beings they had never met and might never see again. The contrast was jarring for the hostages who witnessed it. These humans could kill with terrifying speed and precision, yet they showed remarkable compassion for the innocent. It was as if they were two different species depending on who they were facing. Sergeant Mendez personally led the assault on the final Marauder position, a barricaded section near the station's power core. The last 40 Keth fighters had gathered there, determined to make a final stand. "Surrender now," Mendez called out through her external speakers, "and you will be treated fairly. Continue fighting, and you will die." The response was a barrage of energy bolts that splashed harmlessly against her armor. Mendez sighed. "Have it your way." She led the charge herself, her squad following close behind. The battle was vicious, but brief. The Keth fought with desperate courage. But courage meant nothing against weapons they couldn't understand and couldn't counter. Within 5 minutes, the last of the marauders were dead or dying. Station secure, Mendez reported. All hostages accounted for. Final count: 231 survivors. We lost them nothing since we arrived. On the Resolute, Captain Hayes received the report with a nod of satisfaction. The entire operation, from the first railgun shot to the final all-clear, had taken less than 40 minutes. His casualties were 7 Marines wounded, none seriously. The marauders had lost everything. Begin evacuation procedures, he ordered. Get those hostages to our medical bay. Coordinate with the station's life support to make sure everyone stays stable until we can get them proper treatment. Ambassador Holloway stood beside him on the bridge. Having watched the entire battle unfold on the tactical display, she had never seen violence like this before, never witnessed the precise and terrible efficiency of human warfare. It was both horrifying and strangely inspiring. The Council's going to have a lot of questions, she said quietly. Let them ask, Hayes replied. We saved their people when they wouldn't save themselves. That's the only answer that matters. The first evacuation shuttle docked with the Resolute, and the hostages began to stream aboard. They were a diverse group, representatives of half a dozen species, all of them showing signs of fear and trauma. Many wept as they stepped onto the human vessel, overwhelmed by the simple fact that they were still alive. Vorek's nephew, a young Drothany named Tessic, approached Captain Hayes directly. He was smaller than his uncle, his scales a lighter shade of green. But he carried himself with obvious dignity, despite his ordeal. Captain Tessic said, his voice formal despite the emotions clearly struggling beneath the surface. My people owe you a debt that cannot easily be repaid. You came when no one else would. You fought when no one else dared. The Drothany will not forget this. Hayes accepted the thanks with a simple nod. We did what any civilized species should do. We protected the innocent. Tessic's eyes narrowed slightly, recognizing the subtle criticism embedded in the statement. The Council had stood by while people died. Humanity had acted. The comparison was not flattering to the established powers. Perhaps, Tessic said slowly, the Council needs to reconsider its definition of civilized. As the evacuation continued, the Resolute received a message from Kethra Station. The Council had called an emergency session. High Arbiter Vorak himself wanted to speak with the human delegation. Linda smiled as she read the message. 3 months ago, they had been laughed out of the Grand Assembly. Now they were being summoned back. Things were about to change. The Grand Assembly Hall of Kethra. Prime was silent as Ambassador Linda Holloway walked to the central podium. She had stood in this exact spot 3 months earlier, facing mockery and dismissal. Now the alien delegates watched her with very different expressions. Some showed shock, some showed fear, and some, perhaps, showed the beginnings of respect. High Arbiter Vorak rose from his seat, his massive form casting a shadow across the chamber. His yellow eyes were unreadable, but his voice carried none of the condescension it had held during their first meeting. Ambassador Holloway Vorak began. The Council has reviewed the tactical data from Relay Station 7. We have watched recordings of your vessel's engagement with the Marauder fleet. We have spoken with the hostages you rescued, including my own nephew. We have ... questions. Linda nodded calmly. I am happy to answer them. High Arbiter. Biloxi delegate leaned forward, its crystalline shell catching the light. Your weapons. We were told they were primitive kinetic devices. Yet they destroyed a shielded warship with a single shot. How is this possible? Our railguns accelerate dense metal projectiles using electromagnetic force, Linda explained. The slugs travel at approximately 15 kilometers per second, far faster than any conventional propellant could achieve. At those velocities, kinetic energy alone is devastating. Your shields are designed to block energy weapons. They have no protocol for stopping solid mass. The hall buzzed with whispered conversations. Delegates turned to their advisors, demanding explanations for how such a simple technology had been overlooked. Another delegate, an Athrani with blue-tinged skin and 4 arms, spoke up. But why would you develop such weapons? Energy-based armaments are clearly superior in most respects. They are cleaner, more efficient, easier to maintain. Captain Hayes stepped forward to answer. He had been standing quiet to lie behind Linda, but this was his area of expertise. Because our planet has a history of conflict, he said. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We developed weapons that worked against physical targets, weapons that could destroy fortifications and pierce armor. When we reached space, we adapted those concepts to the new environment. You are saying that your violent past gave you an advantage? Vorak asked. I'm saying that we never assumed our enemies would fight the way we expected, Hayes replied. We always planned for opponents who might surprise us. We designed our weapons to defeat any defense, not just the defenses we knew about. The Sylvari delegate, Essence of Twilight, spoke with its mind voice. But the Council's weapons were unknown to you. How could you know your kinetic projectiles would bypass our shields? Linda answered this one. We didn't know for certain, but we understood the principle. Your shields redirect energy. They absorb photons and scatter particles. That requires detecting the incoming attack and generating a counterforce. A solid object traveling at hypervelocity is through the shield before any detection system can react. Physics doesn't care about advanced technology. Vorak's claws tightened on his armrests. You are saying that a species as young as humanity has discovered a fundamental flaw in Council defense systems. I'm saying that you designed your defenses to counter the threats you knew about. You never imagined that someone might use a different approach. Linda paused, choosing her next words carefully. That is not a criticism, High Arbiter. It is simply an observation. Every technology has limitations. Ours certainly do. But different perspectives can find different solutions. A long silence followed. The delegates looked at each other, processing the implications of what they had just heard. Humanity's primitive weapons were not merely unusual. They represented a fundamental gap in Council thinking. A blind spot that had existed for millennia. Finally, Vorak spoke again. The hostages you rescued have spoken of your soldiers. They describe warriors of remarkable skill and ferocity. Yet they also describe compassion and gentleness, particularly toward the children among the captives. How do you reconcile such contradictions? There is no contradiction, Linda replied. Humans understand the difference between enemies and innocents. We fight to protect, not to destroy. When we face those who threaten the helpless, we show no mercy. When we face the helpless themselves, we show only kindness. That is not contradiction. That is principle. Tesek, who had been given a seat of honor in recognition of his ordeal, stood to address the assembly. I was among the hostages. I watched the human soldiers breach the station and sweep through the corridors. They killed the marauders with terrible efficiency. But when they found us, they became different beings entirely. A human soldier removed his helmet to show his face to a frightened child. Another carried an injured elder on his back for half a kilometer. They could have treated us as mere objectives, rescued assets to be evacuated. Instead, they treated us as people. He looked directly at his uncle. High Arbiter, I have served in the Drothany fleet for 10 years. I have seen our warriors fight many battles, but I have never seen soldiers who could switch so seamlessly between destruction and compassion. The humans are not primitives. They are something we do not have a word for. The assembly erupted in murmurs. Delegates conferred with their aides, their expressions ranging from thoughtful to concerned to openly frightened. Vorak raised a hand for silence. When the hall was quiet again, he turned back to Linda. Ambassador Holloway, 3 months ago this council dismissed humanity as irrelevant. We mocked your technology and denied your application for membership. In light of recent events, the council has been reconsidering its position. Linda kept her expression neutral, but her heart was beating faster. What exactly is the council proposing? Full provisional membership, access to council space, trade routes, and technology exchanges. You would have a voice in council deliberations and the right to establish embassies on any member world. Vorak paused. In return, humanity would contribute to council security operations, particularly in situations where your unique capabilities might be beneficial. It was everything Linda had hoped for, and more. But she was a diplomat, and diplomats never accept the first offer. Provisional membership implies a trial period. What conditions would humanity need to meet for full membership? 5 years of cooperation and demonstrated commitment to Council values, a review of your military doctrines to ensure they align with galactic law, informal treaties establishing limits on the use of kinetic weapons within Council space. Linda glanced at Hayes, who gave a slight nod. The terms were reasonable. I will need to consult with Earth's government, Linda said. But I believe these conditions would be acceptable in principle. Borak inclined his massive head. Then let the record show that humanity has been granted provisional membership in the Galactic Council. May this mark the beginning of a new era of cooperation and mutual respect. As the session concluded, delegates began to approach the human contingent. Many wanted to express gratitude for the rescue. Others wanted to discuss trade opportunities or technology exchanges. A few simply wanted to look at the humans up close. As if they were seeing the species for the first time, Nina found herself standing beside Twilight as the crowd swirled around them. You took a tremendous risk, the Sylvari observed, coming to rescue beings from species that had mocked and dismissed you. Nina shrugged. That's what we do. It's not about who we're saving. It's about who we are. Perhaps that is why your species survives. Why you prosper despite your youth among the stars. You do not calculate whether someone deserves your help before helping them. Maybe, Nina agreed. Or maybe we're just too stubborn to know when we're supposed to give up. Across the hall, Captain Hayes knelt to accept a small gift from a young Drathoni child whose parents he had helped rescue. The fierce warrior who had commanded the destruction of marauder ships now wore a gentle smile as he listened to the child's halting words of thanks. Linda watched the scene with quiet satisfaction. This was humanity at its core, capable of tremendous violence when violence was needed, yet always preferring kindness when kindness was possible. The galaxy had looked at their weapons and seen primitives. They had not looked at their hearts and seen something far more dangerous. Humans were not merely warriors with better guns. They were a species that would fight for strangers, die for principles, and show mercy to those who had shown them none. They were allies worth having and enemies worth fearing. The galaxy had laughed at human weapons. They would never make that mistake again.